I woke up to an empty bed. That in itself wasn't strange. Elias often worked late or fell asleep reading in the study, but something about the silence felt off. No clink of glass, no sound of the dishwasher running, nothing. I reached across the bed, felt the warmth still lingering where he'd been. Then I heard it, low voices coming from the hallway, or rather, one voice, hushed and tense. I sat up. My name is Carolyn Halberd. I'm 38 years old. I live in Washington, D.C., in a townhouse that looks like it came from a modern architecture magazine. I've written speeches for senators and CEOs. I've sold ideas for a living, shaped them into truths the public could swallow. But that night, none of that mattered, because I was married to a man who didn't sound like himself behind that closed door. I got up quietly and padded barefoot to the study. The door was slightly ajar. A line of amber light spilled across the hallway rug. Elias's voice was low, but unmistakably his. Smooth, practiced. The voice that could sell anything to anyone. She still doesn't suspect a thing, he said, pausing. We're nearly done. The pipeline deal is airtight. I stood there, suddenly cold despite the summer air. My fingers curled around the hallway molding, the way they had around a debate podium years ago when I was fresh out of grad school and terrified of forgetting my lines. She still doesn't suspect. He was talking about me. I stepped back before I could hear more. My foot caught the corner of the rug, but I managed not to fall. Back in our bedroom, I climbed into bed and pulled the covers to my chest like they were armor. My heart hammered in my throat. 10 seconds later, I heard him walk down the hall, calm, unhurried. The door opened. There you are, he whispered, slipping into bed beside me. I kept my breathing steady. He kissed my forehead gently, fingers brushing my cheek. Long day, he murmured. I nodded slightly, pretending to shift in my sleep. Inside, something had already cracked open. A thin fault line, barely visible, but enough to know everything had changed. This wasn't late-night work. This wasn't a client call or a quick check-in with the Tokyo office. He was lying, and whatever pipeline deal he was talking about, I was somehow a part of it. In the quiet darkness, I stared up at the ceiling and waited until his breathing evened out beside me. He kissed me like nothing was wrong. But everything was, and I had no idea how deep it would go. The next morning, I woke before Elias. He was still curled under the duvet, one arm stretched across my pillow like he hadn't spent the night deceiving me. I moved quietly, slipping into my robe and heading downstairs with the kind of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Something in my gut told me not to wait for answers, not from him. He'd always managed our finances. At first, it was a relief. Numbers bored me. I wrote speeches, dealt in persuasion and tone, not spreadsheets. But now, the thought of not knowing made my stomach twist. I opened my laptop at the dining room table, fingers hesitant as I typed in the name of the bank. For a moment, I stared at the login screen. We had a shared account. One password. One marriage. At least that's what I thought. When the dashboard loaded, it took a second to make sense of what I was seeing. The balance was healthy, no surprises there. But the transaction history told a different story. Tiny payments, some only a few $100s, all heading out to companies with vague corporate names. Ledgewell Solutions, Corvaris Holdings, a dozen others I'd never heard of. Each one led to a different routing number. Most listed addresses overseas, Cyprus, Singapore, even the British Virgin Islands. It didn't look like personal spending. It looked intentional, structured, quiet. The front door clicked open behind me. I froze. Elias walked in wearing joggers and a t-shirt, coffee and pastry in hand. His smile was casual, annoyingly so. "You're up early," he said, kicking off his shoes by the door. "Didn't sleep well?" I clicked the browser closed. "Yeah," I said, turning in my chair. "Weird dreams." He walked past me and set the coffee down in front of me. "Croissant," he said, grinning. "Your favorite. Bribery for making you suffer through that gala Friday." I forced a laugh and took a sip of the coffee, buying myself time. "You checking email?" he asked, gesturing to the laptop. "Just sorting some invoices for the foundation," I lied. His eyes flicked to the screen, then to me, just for a moment. But something in his face shifted. Not panic, he was too polished for that, but a flicker of calculation. "You know," I said casually, I saw some transfers when I logged in, from the joint account. Looks like consulting fees? Elias didn't blink. Yeah, back-channel fees for private work, he said, shrugging as he pulled a bottle of water from the fridge. It's just part of how international clients handle compensation. Easier than running it through payroll. His voice was smooth, but I caught it, that half-second delay. The flicker, the twitch in his cheek. I see, I said, smiling gently. Makes sense. He walked over and kissed the top of my head. You're cute when you play accountant. I smiled back, but inside, everything was shifting. The illusion of trust, of unity, it was crumbling quietly beneath us. That night, I watched him more carefully. Every text was answered with his phone screen turned face down. Every call was taken behind a closed door. And every smile he gave me felt like a performance I'd already stopped clapping for. It happened on a Thursday night, the kind of night where nothing is supposed to change. I was rinsing dishes in the kitchen while Elias showered upstairs. We'd finished dinner, salmon, asparagus, polite conversation. And he'd gone to shower before his late video call with a client in Dubai. That's what he said anyway. I reached for a dish towel and noticed his phone lying on the counter. Face up. No passcode screen. I hesitated. We never went through each other's phones. Not out of principle, just habit. Trust, I once believed, was the whole point. But tonight, I picked it up. The screen opened without protest. No fingerprint, no Face ID. Just open, like a door left ajar on purpose. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but when I opened his messages, I found it almost immediately. A contact with no name. Just a number. The message preview was short. Send her the Polaris memos. Keep her unaware. Clock's ticking. I stared at it, rereading the words. Send her the Polaris memos. Keep her unaware. Clock's ticking. Her, me. My skin went cold. The thread was full of similar messages. Transactional, clinical. Always the same number, always the same tone. I scrolled up. One message from 2 weeks ago read, once the foundation closes, she'll be out. Make sure the filings are clean. Another, use her credentials. She won't question it if it looks like PR. I backed out of the messages and opened his notes app. A folder labeled Polaris. Inside were drafts, bullet points, timelines. Something about offshore partnerships, regulatory arbitrage, export permissions, pipeline lobbying. Complex, dense language. But I could tell. My name showed up too often. Caroline Halberd, Public Trust Proxy / Speech Access. Use DC. Address as legitimacy, do not reveal funding origin. She'll bolt. My stomach flipped. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Screen down now, just like he always did. The water from the faucet had long gone cold. By the time Elias came downstairs, towel around his neck, fresh shirt clinging to his back. I was already sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading. He kissed my cheek. Wish me luck, he said, gesturing to his laptop. This client is brutal. I smiled up at him, nodding like everything was fine. But I had already seen enough. This wasn't just deception. This was orchestration. He wasn't lying to protect me. He was using me, positioning me, inserting me into something called Polaris, something I didn't understand yet, but already knew was dangerous. And it was time to prepare, not to confront, to protect. I would need proof, and I would need help. But first, I needed to stop pretending I was still asleep. The next morning, I didn't go into the office. I told Elias I had a migraine. He offered to reschedule my calls for me, but I waved him off with a tired smile. As soon as he left, I opened my laptop and searched for Denise Shaw. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I trusted her. Back in grad school, she was the one who could out-argue any professor and still beat you at darts afterward. Now she specialized in corporate ethics and asset protection. If anyone knew how to untangle a mess like this, it was Denise. She answered on the third ring. Caro, well, this is unexpected. I didn't waste time. Can we meet today? There was a pause, then her voice shifted from friendly to focused. Name it. We met that afternoon at a quiet cafe in Dupont Circle, a block from her office. She wore a black blazer and no-nonsense heels, and as soon as she sat down, she ordered a double espresso without looking at the menu. Okay, she said, steepling her fingers. Talk to me. I laid it all out. The late-night call, the financial transfers, the text message about Polaris, and the terrifying implication that Elias wasn't just lying to me. He was maneuvering me, using my name, my reputation, and quite possibly my foundation, without my knowledge. Denise didn't blink. She didn't look shocked, just activated. Do you have access to the foundation accounts? Yes, I said, but I don't monitor the day-to-day filings. Elias handles most of the grant funnels. I just sign off on speeches and appearances. Her expression tightened. We need to assume he's used that gap to move money, maybe to set up a backdoor. A backdoor to what? To pin it on you if this goes south. That landed hard. I looked away, swallowing the sting of betrayal. Then she asked the question I'd been avoiding all morning. How much is at stake? I hesitated. Just under $500 million, she blinked. Say that again. Speech royalties, media licensing, a string of international publishing rights, and our private foundation, I said. Plus some estate trusts under both our names. She sat back, eyebrows raised. Okay, that's a very big target. I nodded. Denise leaned forward again. We need to ring-fence your assets, immediately. That means pulling anything with your name into separate legal shelters, transferring the IP licenses to a standalone entity, and locking the foundation's grant-making authority until we can audit the structure. Will he notice? Oh, he'll notice. But by the time he does, it'll be too late. I exhaled, feeling something I hadn't in days. Clarity. Denise opened her laptop, already typing. I'll bring in my asset partner and a forensic accountant. We'll have to do this fast. 72 hours. Tops. The next 3 days passed in a blur of document transfers, phone calls, encrypted emails, and late-night courier drop-offs. We converted my speech IP into an irrevocable trust with third-party oversight. We split the foundation's operating permissions and assigned Denise's team to monitor outgoing funds. Every signature, every redirect, was legally sound and designed to withstand scrutiny. On the third night, I sat alone in my kitchen, rereading the filing that gave me sole control over the publishing rights. Rights Elias had used as leverage for years. It was done. He could still try to fight me, but I wasn't unprotected anymore. The chessboard had shifted, and I was no longer playing defense. Elias came home early. That alone set off alarms. He usually lingered at the office or met clients for drinks, but today he walked in at 4:30 sharp. His blazer crisp, his hair still damp from what looked like a fresh trim. The kind of polish a man wears when he's about to execute something important. I was in the kitchen, pretending to rearrange the spice rack. Hey, he said lightly, setting his briefcase on the counter. Got out early for once. Lucky me, I said, offering a small smile. He watched me for a beat longer than usual, then reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. Sleek, black, thick with neatly bound pages. Let's talk, he said, placing it gently on the marble island between us. I stared at it. Divorce? I asked, already knowing. He nodded, hands tucked casually into his pockets, like he was recommending a new vacation spot. Look, we've been drifting. You know that. I think it's time we face it head on. Do this the mature way. No fights. No ugliness. I opened the folder slowly. He had gone all out. Amicable tone, pre-filled disclosures, a proposed split of assets that looked fair at a glance. But I'd read enough contracts in my life to know where the traps hide. The foundation. The royalties, the trusts, gone. He was offering me a clean break, on paper. In reality, he was cutting me out of my own work. The empire I'd helped build. The name I'd made valuable. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. There's something you should know before we go any further. He raised an eyebrow. Oh? It's all protected now. His smile flickered. What? The foundation, the intellectual property, the royalties, all of it. I ring-fenced it this week. I kept my voice calm. I'm not parting with my legacy just because you think I won't notice the sleight of hand. He laughed. Short, breathy. Caroline, come on, you don't even handle those details. You've never cared about the back end. I do now, I said evenly. His eyes narrowed. You brought someone in? I said nothing. That's a mistake, he said quietly, all the warmth draining from his tone. You think you can box me out? I tilted my head. I know I already did. He stared at me, jaw tense. If you think this ends clean, you're wrong. You're not built for war, Caroline. Maybe not, I said. But I'm done being a pawn in your game. He picked up the folder and tucked it under his arm. You'll regret this, he said, already walking out of the room. I didn't answer. I just waited for the sound of the front door closing, not softly, not kindly, but with a sharp finality that echoed through the house. Let him rage, let him plot. He had made his play. Now it was my board, my rules. By Monday morning, the whispers had started. It was subtle at first. Pauses in conversation when I walked into the break room at the firm. Polite smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. One assistant I'd worked with for 4 years avoided eye contact altogether. I told myself it was nothing. Until Natalie, my personal assistant, came into my office with a manila envelope, looking deeply uncomfortable. You're going to want to see this, she said quietly, placing it on my desk. I opened it, half expecting some overdue paperwork or a financial printout, but it wasn't that. Inside was a color printout of a forum thread. Anonymous. Sloppy grammar, but loud enough to feel orchestrated. A series of claims, each more specific than the last. DC. Speech consultant embezzled donor funds from private foundation. She moved the money into offshore trusts, just as her divorce was announced. Everything was in her name. Textbook fraud. I stared at the screen captures, the timestamps, the highlighted usernames with strings of numbers, clearly bots or burner accounts, but they had just enough technical details to cause doubt, just enough to poison the air. My name was all over it. Full name, city, affiliation, not just a smear. A threat? Natalie cleared her throat. People are talking. I don't believe it, obviously, but you should know it's spreading. A reporter from Capitol Beat called twice, asking for comment. I closed the folder carefully. Thank you, I said. Please forward anything further to Denise Shaw. All press inquiries too. Natalie nodded and left. I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't some petty retaliation. Elias wasn't going through the courts. Not yet. He was trying to break me in the court of opinion first. He wanted to scare me, isolate me, ruin my reputation so badly that I'd come crawling to the negotiating table. He'd always been a strategist, but I wasn't the same woman who used to write behind podiums and smile on command. I picked up my phone and called Denise. She answered on the second ring. Tell me, she said. I've been anonymously accused of embezzlement, I said flatly. Offshore funneling, donor fraud. The whole playbook silence, then the clatter of a keyboard. He's not just playing dirty, she muttered. He's burning the house down. Can you stop it? Oh, I'm going to bury it, she said. We'll issue a cease and desist within the hour. File for defamation and demand takedowns from every platform that hosted it. I'll also prep a formal press statement in case this reaches mainstream. Thank you. We're not playing defense anymore, Caroline. He wants war? We'll give him one. That night, I went home and poured myself a glass of wine. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I sat at the kitchen table and read every line of that thread again, underlining the claims with a red pen, one by one. Elias was betting I'd buckle under the shame. But he forgot something important. I'd spent my life teaching powerful people how to survive the spotlight, and I'd just found my own. Denise called me in the middle of a Thursday meeting. Her voice was clipped. You need to come in. Now, I canceled my call without an excuse and headed straight to her office. When I stepped inside, she was already pacing behind her desk. A thick folder sat open in front of her, red tabs sticking out like warning flags. He filed suit, she said before I could speak, and he brought backup. I sank into the chair across from her. Backup? Denise tapped the folder. Victor Leontov. Ring a bell? I blinked. The consultant? More like a professional fixer with a talent for forging financial documents. He's got a past. 2 sealed settlements involving falsified paperwork on federal contracts. Nothing ever stuck, but the man's poison. And now he's working with Elias. He's listed as co-plaintiff and forensic witness, she said. They've filed a civil suit claiming you rerouted marital assets during the marriage into protected trusts using concealed transfers. Without Elias's knowledge. I laughed, bitter and stunned. That's the opposite of what happened. Denise nodded. I know, but they've manufactured evidence to back the story. Here? She handed me a packet of supposed bank statements and transaction records. At first glance, it looked real. My name, the dates, even my digital signature at the bottom of one account authorization. But the longer I stared, the more things felt off. That account never existed, I said, pointing. And that date? I was in Geneva that week for the UN summit. Elias was with me. They're betting on noise, Denise said. Most judges wouldn't know to dig this deep without guidance. That's why we're bringing in our own expert. She opened another folder. Meet Grace Lynn, Digital Forensics, former Treasury auditor. Her team's already digging into the metadata. Grace appeared later that afternoon. Sharp blazer, sharper eyes. She sat across from me in the conference room, already scrolling through a forensic analysis report on her tablet. The signatures were layered, she explained. Yours were lifted from a PDF of a publishing contract from 3 years ago. Someone overlaid them onto blank templates. Sloppy work, if you know what to look for. What about the timestamps? Fabricated. There's no legitimate server trail, just local saves and image files. It'll crumble under pressure. I felt myself exhale for the first time in hours. Denise folded her arms. This isn't just a defense play anymore. We're filing a counterclaim, fraud, defamation, malicious prosecution. I nodded slowly. Let's do it. That night, I sat in my car outside the townhouse and stared at the front door. Elias was trying to erase the truth by writing a louder lie. He wanted me silenced, buried under doubt, disgraced before I could respond. But he underestimated one thing. I wasn't just protecting my assets anymore. I was protecting my name. And if he wanted a courtroom, I'd give him one, fully lit, fully armed, and with receipts. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, the temperature was fine, but everything about it felt sterile, impersonal, like the truth had to fight for space among all the procedure and polished shoes. Elias sat across the aisle, 3 chairs down from his attorney, perfectly composed in a navy suit. Same confident posture, same practiced expression. But the man beside him wasn't Victor Leontov. That chair was empty. When the judge called the session to order, Denise leaned toward me and whispered, Leontov bailed. No show. We filed a motion to strike his testimony. Should be a slam dunk. I kept my eyes forward and nodded. Opening arguments were dry. Elias's lawyer claimed I'd obscured significant community assets and used international channels to shield marital property. It was theatrical but vague. All smoke and suggestion. Then Denise stood. She was calm, clear, and devastating. We will prove that not only did Ms. Halberd act entirely within her legal rights, she said, but that the plaintiffs have filed falsified documentation and engaged in a coordinated attempt to mislead the court. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. By the time Grace Lynn took the stand, I could see Elias shifting in his chair. The screen behind her displayed side-by-side comparisons of the forged documents and the originals. This digital signature, Grace explained, pointing with a laser pen, was extracted from a 2021 contract and applied using basic editing software. The metadata shows a saved timestamp, but no traceable server path. It's a copy of a copy, the judge leaned in. Grace clicked to the next slide. Additionally, this account number doesn't exist. The institution confirmed it in writing. Elias's lawyer objected. Overruled. Denise followed with one last exhibit, a sworn affidavit from the Geneva Summit coordinator. It confirmed I'd been overseas on the exact date of a supposed financial transfer Elias submitted. After that, there wasn't much left to argue. The judge reviewed the statements and ruled within the hour. The court finds no credible evidence of financial misconduct on the part of Ms. Halberd. The claims presented were not only unsubstantiated, they were intentionally fabricated. The case is dismissed in full. He turned to Elias. Plaintiff is ordered to cover all legal fees incurred by the defense. Gavel. Silence. It was over. Outside the courtroom, Elias followed me into the hallway, voice low. You didn't have to destroy me, he said. There wasn't anger in his voice anymore, just disbelief. I turned and looked him in the eyes. You destroyed yourself. He opened his mouth to respond, but I was already walking away, heels clicking against the marble, the last echo of a woman he thought he could silence. He tried to play strategist, but I knew how to fight clean, and sometimes clean is the sharpest blade there is. There was no celebration, no champagne toast, no dramatic press statement, just quiet, which honestly was exactly what I wanted. A few weeks after the verdict, I walked along the Potomac at dawn, the same path Elias and I used to take when we first moved into the townhouse. Back then, everything felt like possibility. Now it just felt real. I breathed in the morning air, sharp, clean, full of early joggers and ducks skimming the surface like they had no idea entire lives had just burned down nearby. The townhouse was mine now. So was the foundation, the rights to every speech I'd ever written, and the publishing contracts that still spun out into 5 continents. I didn't lose a single thing, except him. But truthfully, I didn't miss Elias. I missed who I thought he was. That's a very different kind of grief, letting go of an illusion you helped build. For the first time in years, I started writing again. Not behind closed doors for other people's podiums, but in my own voice. Essays, op-eds, a few conference speeches on ethics in consulting and the cost of silence. I spoke once at Georgetown, just a short panel talk about financial autonomy and legacy protection for public figures. When someone asked how I kept going, I said, "Control over your life isn't a luxury. It's a right. And when betrayal comes, and it always comes with a smile, the only thing that can stand against it is truth. And truth," I added, "is the only sword that never dulls." The audience went still. A few heads nodded. One woman in the front row teared up. Afterward, a young law student came up to me in the hallway and said, "You don't seem angry." "How?" I paused, then said, "Because I survived it. And once you survive something, it loses the power to own you." Some days are still hard. The headlines died down, but the echo takes longer to fade. Sometimes I'll walk past a lobbyist I used to know and see the flicker in their eyes. The hesitation of someone trying to decide if they believe the worst thing they heard. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the silence they helped create. Me? I'm walking forward now. No more surveillance. No more closed doors. No more pretending everything's fine. Just me. Clean, quiet, and free. That's the sky after the storm. You don't rebuild all at once, but you begin.